The red light blinked like a warning flare in the quiet grocery store, sharp and unforgiving, and the silence that followed felt louder than any alarm. A single mother stood frozen at the counter with a cart half full of hope and half full of fear, the weight of the moment pressing into her chest as if the whole world had decided to pause just to watch her fail. It was the kind of moment that makes your hands tremble and your vision narrow, when pride and panic collide and you realize how thin the line is between surviving and falling apart. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that one small moment can change a life, take a second right now to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this matter because people like this exist all around us. The woman's name was Elena, and she had learned to measure her days in careful calculations. Rent first, utilities next, food last, and always something left undone. The numbers never quite worked, but she made them stretch through grit and quiet determination. That afternoon, the grocery store felt colder than usual, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like they were whispering judgments she had already heard 1,000 times in her own mind. She had come in with a list written on the back of an envelope, folded and unfolded so many times it was soft as fabric. Bread, milk, eggs, rice, a few apples, and the cheapest pack of chicken she could find. No extras, no mistakes. Her son Mateo had stayed home with a neighbor, feverish and tired, his small body curled under a blanket that smelled faintly of detergent and comfort. Elena had kissed his forehead before leaving, promising she would be back soon with soup and juice, promising the kind of certainty that mothers learn to fake when the truth feels too fragile to share. She had checked her bank app before entering the store, watching the spinning wheel load as if her life depended on it, because in many ways it did. The number looked just enough, barely enough. She took a breath and stepped inside. At the checkout, everything unraveled in seconds. The total was higher than she expected, a few dollars more than what her mental math had prepared her for. She told herself it would still be fine, that there must be some rounding error, that it would go through. When the payment failed, it felt like being pushed off a ledge she did not know was there. Her cheeks burned, and she could feel eyes on her back, even if no one was actually staring. The cashier waited politely, the kind of politeness that still cuts because it highlights the pause, the delay, the problem that needs fixing. Elena reached for her wallet again, fingers clumsy, as if searching harder might summon money that simply was not there. She considered removing items, starting with the apples Mateo loved, the ones she sliced thin to make them last longer. She considered leaving altogether, walking out with nothing and pretending later that the store was out of what she needed. Pride wrestled with necessity, and necessity was winning, painfully and publicly. Her life had not always been this narrow. There was a time when she had a steady job at a small accounting firm, a time when laughter filled her kitchen and plans stretched into the future without fear. Then came the layoffs, sudden and impersonal, followed by months of applications and polite rejections. Then came Mateo's father leaving, not with anger but with absence, a quiet vanishing that hurt more because there was no one to blame loudly. Medical bills arrived like unwelcome guests, stacking up on the counter, each envelope heavier than the last. Elena learned to smile through exhaustion, to say she was fine even when fine felt like a distant memory. As she stood there, deciding which necessities could become luxuries, a subtle shift happened behind her. A presence, calm and unhurried, stepped closer. She did not turn at first, because turning would mean acknowledging help, and accepting help meant admitting defeat. The cashier spoke again, gently, offering to void items. Elena nodded, her throat tight, and reached for the divider to separate what she could afford from what she could not. That was when the moment changed. A stranger behind her, someone whose face she had not seen and whose life she knew nothing about, moved forward with quiet certainty. There was no spectacle, no announcement meant for the room, just an action that cut through the tension like warm light through fog. Payment was offered where payment had failed, generosity where shame had been building. Elena felt it before she understood it, a release in her chest, a sudden loosening of the knot she had been bracing against. She turned then, finally, and met the eyes of a man who looked ordinary in the way heroes often do. He was older, with lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested laughter and loss in equal measure. His jacket was worn but clean, his posture relaxed, as if this was not a sacrifice but a simple decision. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her with recognition, the kind that says he understood exactly how heavy this moment was. Elena tried to protest, to insist she could manage, that it was not necessary, but the words tangled and fell apart before they reached her lips. Gratitude surged in their place, overwhelming and raw. The transaction completed, the receipt printed, and the red light that had felt so condemning moments earlier faded into irrelevance. The groceries were bagged, handed over, real and solid and suddenly miraculous. As she gathered the bags, her hands still shaking, Elena felt tears threaten, the kind that come when you have been strong for too long. She did not cry then, not fully, because public spaces teach us restraint, but something inside her cracked open all the same. She nodded to the man, a small gesture that carried more weight than words ever could, and stepped away from the counter with her head held a little higher than before. Outside, the air was cooler, the sky stretched wide and indifferent, yet somehow kinder than it had been an hour earlier. Elena sat in her car for a moment before starting the engine, hands resting on the steering wheel as she let the reality of what had happened sink in. It was not just the groceries, it was the reminder that she was not invisible, not alone in a world that often feels built to ignore people like her. Someone had seen her struggle and chosen to step in, not for praise, not for recognition, but because they could. On the drive home, memories surfaced of her own mother, a woman who had taught her that dignity was not about never needing help, but about how you respond when help is offered. Her mother had passed years earlier, leaving behind lessons that Elena carried like quiet talismans. One of those lessons echoed now, clear and insistent, telling her that this moment was not an ending but a turning point. When she reached the apartment, Mateo's fever had broken, his skin warm but no longer burning. He smiled when he saw the groceries, a small, tired smile that felt like a victory. Elena unpacked the bag slowly, deliberately, savoring each item as if it were a gift, because in truth, it was. She made soup, the steam fogging up the small kitchen window, the smell filling the space with comfort and normalcy. As Mateo ate, she watched him with a fullness in her chest that had nothing to do with food. That night, after he fell asleep, Elena sat at the table with the receipt folded neatly in front of her. She traced the numbers with her finger, thinking about the stranger and the way his simple act had rippled outward, touching more than just a transaction. She thought about how close she had been to giving up on the day, on herself. She let herself cry then, quietly, the tears sliding down her face as release rather than despair. The days that followed did not magically transform her life. Bills still arrived. Job searches continued. Worry remained a familiar companion. But something subtle had shifted in her posture toward the world. She applied for positions she might have dismissed before. She reached out to a local community center offering free training programs, something she had always told herself she did not have time for. She volunteered one afternoon a week at Mateo's school, partly to be close to him, partly because giving back felt like honoring what she had been given. Weeks later, at that same grocery store, Elena found herself in line again, this time with a bit more breathing room in her budget thanks to a part-time job she had landed through the community center. Ahead of her, a young man fumbled with his wallet, the familiar tension rising in the air. Elena recognized the signs immediately, the stiff shoulders, the forced calm. She felt her heart quicken, the memory of her own moment flashing bright and clear. Without overthinking it, she stepped forward. The decision felt natural, almost inevitable, as if kindness, once received, insists on being passed along. She did not make a show of it. She simply acted, hoping to preserve his dignity the way hers had been preserved. When he turned to look at her, surprise written across his face, she offered a small smile, one that said everything without saying anything at all. Life continued, as it always does, with its uneven mix of struggle and grace. Elena's circumstances improved slowly, not because of a miracle windfall, but because she had been reminded of her own worth at a moment when she needed it most. She carried that reminder with her, letting it inform how she treated others, how she spoke to herself on hard days. Mateo grew stronger, his laughter returning, his world stable in the ways that matter most to a child. Years from now, Elena would still remember the blink of that red light and the quiet courage it took to stand there. She would remember the stranger whose name she never learned, whose face had become a symbol rather than a memory. She would tell Mateo the story when he was old enough to understand, not as a tale of embarrassment, but as a lesson in humanity. She would tell him that help can come from unexpected places, and that accepting it does not make you weak. As this story draws close to its end, if it has stirred something in you, if it has reminded you of a moment when kindness changed your course, or given you the nudge to be that kindness for someone else, please take a moment to like, share, and comment. Your engagement helps stories like this reach hearts that need them. Before the final moment, leave a comment with a single word that this story made you feel, whether it is hope, gratitude, or something else entirely. Those words matter more than you know. Elena never saw that man again, but she did not need to. His presence lived on in the choices she made, in the way she held herself a little straighter, in the quiet confidence that told her she belonged in the world despite its challenges. The red light at the checkout had once felt like an ending, a public marker of failure. Instead, it became the beginning of a chain of compassion, proof that even in ordinary places, extraordinary things can happen when someone chooses to care.